Turn down the lights, get close to the speakers. Things are about to get freaky right here on the very best in paranormal programming. I'm Dave Schrader, and welcome to my Paranormal 60.
I'm not gonna stand here and listen to this baloney. He won't know. He doesn't stand for baloney.
Sounds like a lot of supernatural baloney to me. Supernatural, perhaps. Baloney, perhaps not.
Thank you to all tuning in from around the world. We're a little late tonight because, well, for those of you watching the program, I just got back from a cruise out to Cozumel, Mexico. That's right. I went out with my family. We went and had a nice little 4 or 5 day getaway and went to Cozumel, where I took an extraordinary little side trip once we were there to go to some of the Mayan ruins and get a chance to see them for myself and get to hear about the legend and lore and folklore stories of the Mayan culture. And it was really, really powerful. It was great to hear these cool stories and kind of get some insights into how some of these different religious beliefs and spiritual elements come to life in foreign areas, and things you think you thought you knew, you realize you weren't even close. And it is so cool to get this chance. So I recommend, man, if you get a chance when you're out, whether it's in another state or another country, wherever you may be traveling to, dip into the culture. Try to find somebody, a native of that area, that can maybe talk you through some of the more rich tapestry and history of these locations. It was just so great to get a chance to go out and actually interact with the people and hear their stories firsthand. And one of the, I thought, and we'll get into the show in just a few minutes, but I thought it's interesting, since we're talking about folklore and we're talking about strange beings and things that are all over, right, where it comes to strange supernatural forces, hearing some of the ideals behind the culture and the trees. And I didn't realize this, that many of the Mayan temples would only be built to the top of whatever their highest tree was. They would never go above that. And that the trees represented many different elements. The roots were going to the underworld. The middle was life, and then the tops of the trees, of course, evolving into the afterlife or into the great unknown. And it was just so cool to hear the way the culture reflected on their surroundings so much and knew about how to use the land and chart the skies and the stars. And you hear that all of these cultures from around the world could do these same things, but how did they all know it? Like almost simultaneously. Makes you really do believe that there was some kind of internet in the past, some kind of ethereal internet that interlocked us in a way that is so far from where we are now. So distracted by the technologies that we hold and have to check every 15 minutes to see if we've got another like or another view. And it really kind of saddens my heart, because I realize when these cultures were the strongest is when they were all together, and when they taught and they worked and they stood side by side and they told these tales and experienced these moments, and they were so cued into each other and not something else, that they could do remarkable things under extraordinary circumstances. Areas that should not grow food or provide them with waters, things that they desperately needed, would still be there for them. And it was interesting that many of the religious concepts of the Mayan culture, according to the people we spoke to and that were leading us on this tour, told us about the fact that a lot of these structures, meaning the religious structure, was predicated on, listen, the wealthy, the church, if we do this right, cocoa is superior. Everybody wants the cocoa beans. So you have to give it to the church. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll take care of it, so that the elders and the church leaders would have the best cocoa, have the best everything brought to them. And in a sense, they were using the gods as a way to manipulate people to bring them things and give them the power, which I see in religious cultures across the world, and wonder how much of that. Yet there was something miraculous about the fact of coming together with a common belief and idea that it could bring life to situations. And I think that's a lot about what we're going to discuss this evening, because again, the beings, the black-eyed kids, it's kind of a haunting folklore. It's one of those stories that seems to get whispered and passed amongst different families and has gone by different names. I've heard new things, the hollow children with the black eyes. Hollow meaning in what sense? And from some of the different religious perspectives means without soul, which would again play into the concept of these dark black eyes. The fact that there is no soul, there's nothing, there's no spark of actual life or real consciousness behind it. It's almost like the avatar has somewhat come to life. If you remember in some of the old video games, you'd have the avatar and it would even though you weren't moving, it would continue to kind of walk around and bump into things, and it's like it kind of existed without you. And it makes me wonder how much of these black-eyed kid stories, these hollow children and other folklores that are very similar in nature, follow that same vein, that they're beings that are there that are not that powerful, but then from time to time we remember them. They come back to the foreground of our consciousness, which seems to empower them, give them strength, and they start becoming more prevalent. People are seeing them across the world. And that's what surprised me most about doing the work that I do and hearing the stories of the black-eyed kids, is that at first we looked at this culture as though it was something, this strange fable was nothing more than urban legend, until people from around the world and different cultures and different belief systems and different levels of humanity in those areas all had stories that surround iterations of these same beings. And now they've come back to life. There's been new consciousness breathed into them because of the fears of the people that share these stories and have these experiences. Is it truly that they're seeing these beings, or are they projections from the other side? Are they projections from a consciousness somewhere else trying to find a way into our world? I don't know. I love the black-eyed kid phenomenon. I think part of the reason I love it so much is because there is no hard and fast rules. For a while, we believed the hard and fast rule was they could not enter your home, could not enter your car, could not gain access to you without your permission. Yet we started to hear more and more stories of people that found themselves face to face with these beings in their own home, following them into places that we would feel safe and secure. So they don't seem to follow legend and lore, unless perhaps the legend and lore is the ones that you believe in. And maybe that'd be an interesting element of this, is as we hear these stories, to push more into the nature of those that have had experiences with the black-eyed kids where the story seems to go beyond what we've heard before. Is it because of the beliefs of the experiencer? Because the experiencer doesn't hold the same belief systems of not allowing things in, believing that things could just attach to them by passing their way, crossing their paths somewhere, like a black cat allows them onto you. It's interesting, and I'd love that, if you have concepts on this, if you have ideas about this, email me, dave@paranormal60.com, because I'd love to hear from you, our listeners. But right now, let's turn some focus to our returning guest. She was with us a little over a month ago with her first book coming out. The new book is out and available, called Midnight Visitors: True Stories of Black-Eyed Kids. Gemma Jade, the author, she is our friend, and she is here to share and regale us with more strange stories of black-eyed kids. Gemma, welcome back to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
What do you think about this concept that these beings are always there until we start to recognize them and give them that ability to kind of come back to life? And that's what gives these things and emboldens them, gives them strength to start being seen again.
I believe there definitely could be something to that because in all of the research I did for years, I there were like maybe sometime in right before, so I'd say the 80s, I guess the 80s,
Mhm.
I was gonna say before the 90s. There was this like decade where they really weren't there were almost no reports anywhere. I mean, there were some scattered, but then you get into the 90s, still not too much. And then Brian Bethel, the journalist, comes out and is the first one, as far as anyone knows, to put it on a blog. Then
Mhm.
all of the sudden the sighting started. And that's why a lot of people thought for a long time it was an urban legend. But I think it just put it into the minds of people. So one, they're more aware. Two, I don't think the BEK are tulpas, but I do think there's some tulpa energy there where, like you said, if someone is focused on it or if someone is now aware of it, they have a much higher chance of bringing it to them. And I also feel like it's not so much that we're seeing them more in a lot of cases, it's that we're more easily able to share it now.
I got a call, and I was reminded of this recently when we first began talking about the black-eyed kids, and bringing it out, and we were kind of, half of it's tongue in cheek, half of it's totally freaked out by this being, right? I got a phone call one night on my cell phone from an unknown number, and remember when we used to get those unknown number or
Yeah.
unknown, correct, caller? So I answer the phone. I'm like, "Hello, this is Dave." And the only voice I got, it didn't sound like a child to me, it sounded like a man, and he goes, uh, "Some of us," how did he put it? It was something along the lines of, "Your black-eyed kid stories, some of us grow up, and we still have the black eyes." And then he hung up, and that was
Ooh,
it.
I
And I
just
was
got
like,
chills.
"Right?"
Oh,
And what's really strange to me was that, probably 2, 3, 4 weeks later, I started getting emails from different people saying, "Does anybody ever talk about the black-eyed adults? Because I think I've had encounters with them." And I was like, "It's really weird." As soon as my consciousness became alerted to that, right? The mnemonic trigger, I call it, right? The fact that, like, you buy a specific car, you don't notice that car until you own it, and then all you see is that car because
yeah.
your brain recognizes a pattern. Now that I've had somebody awaken in me the concept that black-eyed adults exist, and I was like, "What the?" And then I started hearing tales of these beings, these black-eyed adults, but most of us automatically ascribe that to being more in the demonic realm. Whereas the black-eyed kids, they have this foreboding sense, this kind of weird, evil malevolence. But a lot of people stop short from calling them a demon, Gemma. Is
Yeah.
that a fair assessment? That people will say they feel dark or they feel threatened, but they don't feel like it's demonic in nature.
Very much yeah, that very much makes sense because I always say I don't really believe that they're demonic, mainly because demons have their own way of appearing as small children without the black eyes and the whole song and dance, and that's kind of what sealed the deal for me, with them not being demonic. But yes, that makes perfect and total sense because there's just so much to it, and it's really
Right.
hard to weed out what doesn't fit because the minute I'm like, "Okay, this isn't a part of that. This isn't a part of the BEK." The next thing I know, I have 12 encounters of everything I just thought wasn't going to be a part of it, and it was hard to write these 2 books back to back, especially the Just Encounters, the Midnight Visitors, because again, every time I was like, "Okay, this probably isn't a real story because I haven't seen that, haven't seen that before," and then all of a sudden, I'm bombarded with tales of the same exact thing happening that I just thought might not be true because I had never heard it before.
Right, and that's what was so strange to me is people, it's like once we name the beings, once they become part of the
Yeah.
lexicon, I don't know if it awakens in people memories, maybe some were suppressed memories, some that I had the memory, I just didn't know what to call them, but you're right, black-eyed kids, black-eyed children, that fits it exactly. It's so simplistic in nature, but then people feel that they can come forward and discuss this. And of course, there is a swath of the public that will tell you fake stories because they want to be
Yeah. They
part
wanna be
of
a part
the
of it.
culture. And so then it gets tough sifting through the stories of what do we believe is real, what do we believe is not. And when it comes to these creatures, what's impressed me is when I've spoken to somebody, and I've said this before, there's been a few military personnel that I've spoken to
Yeah.
where my grandfather served in World War II. He was a paratrooper. He made 4 of the 5 major drops. This guy was balls to the wall brave, right? And he was full of life and just an amazing human being. And when he would talk to me about the war, you could almost see the light go out in his eyes. And as it was, I don't know how else to explain it other than he was wherever he was, telling me the story. He wasn't sitting there before me telling me a
Yeah.
story. He was there in that moment reliving the experience. And when I've spoken to some of, not all of them, and a lot of the ones that I haven't shared are for that reason, that, and I don't want to be judgy, but it's like, oh yeah, I saw this and it was this and they were, and it just
You're
feels like
not
there's
getting
no,
excited about it.
yeah, there's no, well, I know people react differently too, so it's hard for me to
Yeah.
say that. But when there's no connectivity to it. It's not like it impacted them in any certain way.
It's
Um,
traumatic
right. It's almost traumatic,
regardless.
or
Yes.
it's like my experience with UFOs. I saw what I saw, and I know what I saw. And if I talk to you about it, I think you'd see that same kind of glaze effect as I'm going
Mhm.
back into the memory of it. And but it's almost doesn't feel like it's real. It feels like I'm remembering a TV show from a childhood, or
Yep.
somebody else's memory. So it's really kind of weird the way our brains try to shield and protect us from things that
Mhm.
unnerve us. And that's what I found really interesting, is seeing some of these people share their stories with me. And I'm not looking for telltale signs of lies and that they're looking up and to the right or up and to the left, the way they teach you on the CSI
Yeah.
TV shows to tell if you're lying. I'm more intrigued by the way that they share the experience. And you could see that it's more than just a story. It's something that's manifested within the person. It's a tactile expression. They smell it, taste it, feel it. They're there again.
Yeah.
And that's hard to just say. This is guys just trying to, you know, hone in on a popular culture
I
character right
totally
now.
understand. There's just this I don't know. I understand what you're saying, but it is hard to put words to it when you're speaking to, and I call them victims. I refer to people who have encounters as victims or witnesses, but I refer to them as victims because every single one of them across the board, whether they're a little excited about being able to have an experience, if they're really into the paranormal or not, they're all very traumatized by the encounter. And I feel like when I say the BEK are energetic feeders, and I'm sure of that. I don't know how I'm
Mhm.
sure. I guess just through all the research, it's just something I've come to understand as fact. They are energetic feeders, regardless of whatever else they are. And I feel like they've taken a part of the person, of the victim, with them, regardless of whether or not they were let in. There's some disconnect there, or there's something that I believe the BEK are taking from their victims energetically, but it lasts much more long term than slamming the door in their face or,
Right.
God forbid, inviting them in.
It almost feels like you kind of let them in by sharing the story. You didn't have to let them cross the threshold. They still got in. They got into your mind. They got into who
Yes.
you are. I had a woman here in Minnesota at one of the mind, body, spirit expos, whatever. I can't remember. There are many different iterations of that title. But she came up and she's just this sweet, petite little old lady. And she just reached her hands down and put them on top of mine. And she said, I listened to your show and they're very fun and entertaining. But you keep talking about those black-eyed children, and I can tell you from experience, you don't want to keep talking about them because they're going to hear you and they're going to know that you have an interest, and that's what they want. And I said, "Oh, have you had an experience?" And she said, "I will not open that door again, and I will not talk about it. But I'm going to tell you, be careful because it's real. And if you keep discussing it, you might open up your own life to some horrors that you can't even begin to imagine." And, it's tough because I want to respect her, wishes of not going further, telling me the story. But it's kind of like, well, that was a weird warning kind of out of the blue. So I've walked that line of how much of this do I let in? How much do I allow to affect and impact me? And I love a good ghost story. I love a good creepy tale that gets into your head and makes you think about it. But is that what they're hoping for long run, is to have that kind of the claws sunk in and that
Yeah.
it does become part of your fear factor? And you brought up something earlier. Uh, it's much like the character of Pennywise from It. It takes does it take do these beings take on um, the visage of what frightens us? And when it realizes, back in the day, aliens weren't bulbous head, big black eyes. They were humanistic looking. And then Whitley Strieber's book Communion came out and we saw that cover.
Yeah.
And suddenly more and more stories started to appear of that. Now, does that mean more people were awakened to that and remember, oh my God, I've seen that? Or did darkness start to take that
Form.
look?
Yeah.
And now that we talk about the black-eyed kids, are we not tulpaizing them, as in we've created them ourselves, but are we giving form to our fears? Are we allowing that energy of fear that exists around us at all times to find a home, find a way to latch onto something that they know can affect you?
That's so interesting. When you put it that way, it actually does make sense. And I recently was discussing, someone had brought up earlier the MIB in the comments somewhere. And I was doing a video and I was discussing whether or not the MIB, the BEK, the WIB, shadow entities, Hatman, all of these dark, quote unquote, entities, whether or not they're all the same thing that just takes on a different form based on something with your energy, something based in your fear set. When I wrote Danger at Your Door, which is the first book I did, and Midnight Visitors is the companion to that, which we discussed last time I was on your show, I actually wrote in the introduction, I believe, about how I was afraid. And it took me much longer to write that book than it did any of my previous three,
Mhm.
because I was afraid that I was going to call them to me. And I'm really not afraid of much. I actually enjoy most encounters, even if they're, terrifying, because I don't know, I just love it. I love to explore and research and learn. And, ooh, what's that? Yeah, that's terrifying. What is that? But the BEK are something that I am absolutely more than terrified of bringing anywhere near me. And I always have been since the moment I first saw an episode featuring them on a television show. But I've also been overtly obsessed ever since that moment. I don't think there was a time that went by, an entire week in the last 11 years that I didn't think about them at least twice and look something up about them at least once. So I get it. And I do understand that, because I was just discussing that. Is it just all darkness? I tend to believe they're interdimensionals because of some things when we discuss encounters later, I'll mention, but there is that part of me that's like, what are the odds that like all these things are suddenly just popping up and that they're
Right.
real in all these different forms?
Quick question from the audience here. Jane asks, is the book going to be in the UK? And what's the price on the book? Please, Dave or Gemma, please answer. That's what Jane wants to know. Is the book going to be available through Amazon over in the UK?
I really don't know. I would have to get back to you on that. If you want to email me, I can definitely give you an answer on that. And it is $8.99 for the book.
Very cool. And we
I
have a
never
link for
even
that
asked
book
that
on
question.
today's program as well, so that you can find that. Yeah. Yeah, check into your Amazon. We're working on that as well with my book,
I
Theater of the
definitely
Mind.
will,
Yeah,
because I have a lot of subscribers across the pond too. So
very cool. All right, let's start talking about some of the stories now. You're again, for people that might have missed your interview last month. Tell us the title of the book that came out a little over a month ago.
Danger at Your Door, Terrifying Encounters with Black-Eyed Kids. And that is the researched legend. That's all of the research behind that. all the thoughts, theories, speculation, ideas, facts throughout the ages from what I can find. Midnight Visitors is encounters only.
All
Because I
right.
know when I read a book, I go right for the encounters and then I go back for the rest. So I was like, all right, let's do some encounters too, some more encounters.
And in my new book, Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness, we do include one of my favorite black-eyed kid encounters, and I'll be
Ooh.
sprinkling my black-eyed kid stories throughout my books as well, so that we've got a little taste of everything in them. But I love when people come together and we'll put together these books that are really comprehensive on the black-eyed kids. So what story do you want to give us here before we go to our first break, Gemma? What's a good encounter that really kind of you find
Hmm.
super unnerving?
Oh my gosh, there are so many, and there are a lot that are happening at military bases. And I believe I talked about the one last time with the apple, and I get like flustered because I have so many in my head. Okay, so I'll bring one up that happened in the middle of the woods, and this is happening more and more. A man, or it was a woman, she was camping overnight. She was a photographer of sorts, and she was a freelance, and she was trying to take pictures of landscapes and beautiful nature out in the mountains, in the middle of the forest, in the middle of nowhere. And she went into an isolated spot that was technically off limits in a national park. I don't know how she got in, but she wanted to take pictures and show that she was risky. I don't really know what her deal was. She had been a photographer her whole life. She was looking to get back into it, and she spent the night, overnight in the woods, and she was by herself. There were no people around because it was an area you weren't supposed to be in. So when she was hearing walking around, she was assuming it was some sort of animal, some sort of, something, and she just decided to go into her tent and go to sleep. The very next day, she decided to snap pictures. She had thought she had seen some image of a humanoid or a human standing near a tree, but it looked all in shadow, and she got really freaked out. She thought about snapping her camera, and she was like, "You know what? I'm just going to pretend I don't see it and go in and, hope everything's okay." The next day she wakes up and she looks over and she doesn't see anything that could have made that shape. So she's a little freaked out, but she's like, I've got these pictures to take. She gets to a very, even more isolated part of the woods. And she made it very clear to tell me many times she was nowhere, days hikes away from her vehicle and all this and civilization, other people. And as she's looking through the lens, she sees a little dot that kind of looks like it could be a person across, like very far away from her, maybe 2 football fields length away. And she's kind of looking, she's wiping her lens off. And then she sees it closer and she sees that it looks like a small human being, like a child. She takes her eye out of the camera to look again. She still sees it looks like a little child, but she can't really see it. The next thing she knows, she looks through the lens again, and there is a black-eyed child. This is broad daylight in the middle of nowhere. No one will hear you scream. And she jumps, she screams, she looks, and when she looks around the camera, sure enough, there's a BEK there. And the BEK said to her, "We don't like image takers." And she said, I turned and ran and left all of my equipment, everything there, ran till I couldn't run anymore and was terrified to camp out. And I heard walking and I saw the same small humanoid shadowy images leaning against trees all night long, but I was too afraid to even aim a flashlight at them. I just wanted to get the heck out of there. And she is one of maybe a handful of photographers who have had an experience with the BEK, and the BEK make mention of not liking photo takers, photographers, or image takers.
Interesting, huh? Don't and again, there is the old legend and folklore behind taking photographs that you're
Yes.
stealing a piece of the soul. And maybe these beings don't want proof, or are they, because we don't see much video footage. There's really no video footage or photographs, not
No.
even Ring videos. And that's been one of the stories. I've had a few of the people that have reached out to me telling me, with my Ring camera, Dave, we had this encounter. And when I went back to the Ring camera, you can hear us talking and you can hear us at the front door. And there's nobody talking back to us. And there's no
Yes.
image of these kids. So
Yep.
again, that starts fitting into the demonic vampiric kind of concept or construct of these beings. something just kind of struck me. And I apologize, Gemma. I don't remember if you covered this in your first book,
It's okay.
but um, we know the power that water holds with the paranormal.
Yes.
I wonder if the black-eyed kids might be the souls of children who lost their lives in drownings, because there's a famous image of this young girl kind of clinging to a branch, and it was during a flood. They were trying to save her. They ended up saving her, but she passed soon after. But her eyes had turned black, and it was from the immersion in the water for a long period. And it just kind of struck me, and I'm like, boy, wouldn't that be something? Because we do know how
Wow.
the power of water seems to embolden some supernatural spirits. If
Oh,
these beings
yeah.
are children that drowned, and that would actually fit really. Boy, I almost wish I could go back and put that concept in for the book that I just released, because I share a story about a girl by water who keeps trying to get the couple to join her, and it was a black-eyed kid
Wow.
experience. So I wonder if these beings, spirits, might have something to do with drowning.
That is crazy. I'm gonna look into that because I never made the connection. I have said maybe they are kids who are missing or murdered in the woods, centuries ago, and that's with the
Mhm.
clothing but I never made the water connection, but it makes just as much sense as anything else we know. And I haven't heard that yet. That may be an original theory there, Dave.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've
I
had an
think that's
original idea.
original.
Let me jot that down. Today
I'm
I
already on
thought
it. I'm
for
taking notes.
myself. But yeah, that's great. Interesting. Well, I'll tell you what, folks, in my book, I'm working on the audio book now. So hopefully when I release it, and within the next 30 to 45 days, I plan on doing a little bit of more talk on each story, not just the stories, but giving you a little bit more. So maybe we'll cross that bridge on that as well. We do need to take just a very short break. We'll come back. We'll discuss more with our guest. And remember to get the book. There's a link for it on today's program guide, Midnight Visitors, True Stories of Black-Eyed Kids. Gemma Jade, our guest, when we return right here on the very best in paranormal programming. I'm Dave Schrader, and this is the Paranormal 60. All right, I've heard you. You want me to come down south? I'm coming down south. The Cajun Country Paracon is taking place March 23rd from 9 a.m. till 4 p.m. Shane Pittman from the Holzer Files and me, Dave Schrader, will both be there and on hand. There's also Sarah Lemos. There is Jeremy Leonard, the Cajun demonologist. Gosh, so many different great guests are going to be on hand for that weekend. And I would love for you to join us and be a part of this. You can get information by going to Facebook, Louisiana Spirits. You can find it Facebook, Louisiana Spirits, or just go to darknessevents.com. Darknessevents.com. That's coming up March 23rd, 2024. If you'd like to come on out to Minnesota and spend a weekend shifting the paranormal with me and graveyard shift leader Dalen Spratt, we'd love to have you for the weekend as we investigate claims of the paranormal at the Palmer House. Not only will we ghost hunt and investigate within the Palmer House, we'll also be going out on a few field trips to visit a few local haunts that you may find compelling. And we'll let Dalen do his best to communicate with the other side. Shifting the paranormal, that's April 19th through the 21st at the Palmer House in Sauk Center, Minnesota. And then the Haunted Shanley Hotel in Napanoch, New York, one of my absolute favorite locations last year. I finally got to go to the Shanley, and it lived up to every expectation. What an amazing haunt. I'm back with Scotty the Medium. Scotty Davis will be there, and we're doing meet and greets. There's going to be a gallery reading, presentations, overnight accommodations, paranormal investigations, and more. I know that there are only a few of the full event tickets, but there are the meet and greet and presentation tickets. So if you're in that area and you'd like to come on out and meet us and get a chance to say hi, maybe even buy a copy of my book, get a reading from Scotty, you can join us there. And Hillview Manor is bringing me back this year for May 11th. We'll be going back out to Hillview Manor, one of the most haunted buildings I had a chance to investigate last year as well. So many EVPs, so many spirits crying out to be heard from the other side. And then Parapsychon as I return. That's right. I think this is my 4th time going back to Mansfield Reformatory for Parapsychon 5. I'll be one of the special guests this year, along with many other amazing speakers. And that's May 17th through the 19th at Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio. This is one you should definitely make, because if you have never been to Mansfield Reformatory, this is one of the most haunted prisons that you'll ever get a chance to investigate and be a part of. And then join me out in Oregon for the Oregon Bigfoot Festival and beyond. Ronnie LeBlanc from Expedition Bigfoot will be there. I will be the paranormal contingent. There'll be other fascinating and interesting guests on hand for a weekend of conversations on everything from Bigfoot to ghosts, UFOs, and beyond. That's June 29th in Portland, Oregon. And again, tickets for all of these amazing events can be found right at darknessevents.com. How about the Magical History Weekend at the Piper's Opera House in Virginia City, Nevada? You've seen Virginia City on just about every paranormal show under the sun. This is your chance to come on out and hear from Dustin Perry, the queen of Nevada ghosts. Janice Oberding is going to be there. I'll be on hand. So many other great guests. We'd love for you to join us. Again, tickets for this event and all others can be found right on our website at darknessevents.com. Okay, we are back. Gemma Jade is with us this evening. Let's dig into some more creepy stories featured in Midnight Visitors, True Stories of Black-Eyed Kids. That's the new book. It's the second part of her book. She came out with about a month and a half ago, which was more of the research-based, researching the folklore, the histories, the stories of these. These are the true encounters that people have relayed, talking about the Black-Eyed Kids. Have you ever come across somebody who has shared a story about letting them in? And if so, what have you heard happened?
Well, I do believe last time I was on, I told the story about the mom. She had run really quickly. She left her 10-year-old son in the car. She pulled over, left the car running, went inside a bodega, grabbed milk bread, ran back into the car. When she looked in the rearview mirror, she was kind of on autopilot. Her son was old enough to sit there for 4 minutes. She did it all the time. She looked in the rearview mirror, and there was a black-eyed kid, a random child with black eyes, with its arm around her son. She flipped. She grabbed her son out of that car so fast, left the doors open, ran back in. She was so terrified and like even a little confused. So she couldn't really explain. The guy behind the counter inside of the store thought someone was trying to break into her car. So anyway, because I told it, I'll give you the very short version. She ended up calling her husband. And she said, look, I will explain when we get home, but I'm not getting back in the car. You come drive my car home. I'll drive yours and we'll discuss it. So he says, oh, okay, this is weird, but fine. They make it home. The woman and her son make it home, and the father does not make it home. He ends up in the hospital. He got into a car wreck on the way home and said that the last thing he remembered was a very foul stench and being very dizzy. And then that was it. He woke up in the hospital. He must have crashed the car. Now, the father ended up being perfectly fine, but for I think it was even 18 months, this boy was sick. And I've heard this across the board with people who have claimed to have let these things in their home, okay, where, okay, first they thought he had the flu, so they start treating him for that. No, he has the measles. They start treating him for the measles. Now he has something with his kidneys. Then he has Crohn's disease. Every time they start to treat one thing, it would turn into a completely different thing. And they thought he was going to pass. It went on for so long. Finally, the parents said, we need to get back to our religion. And they decided it would be the best thing to have a prayer session over the boy at the church. They brought the boy into the church and they had the whole congregation praying over him. And immediately, he was better. No more sickness, no more illnesses. And when the mother said, honey, did you know that boy? Like, how did he get into our car? Because, they have to be invited. She didn't know that, but I was thinking it too. And the kid said, he just asked me if I wanted to be friends and if he can come to our house. So I said, yeah. Kids are so pure in that way. And also there's a story circulating the internet that I wasn't sure if I believed in it or not. And I couldn't personally verify it. So I put in the book, I was unsure about it, but it is in there, where this elderly couple in the middle of a blizzard get a knock at the door. They live, I think it was in Virginia, but they lived kind of like in the middle of nowhere. There were Mennonite children. So at first they thought it was Mennonite children before they saw the eyes, and it's blizzarding out. The kids look alone. The woman said, sure, come on in. I'll make you some hot chocolate. So they're like, we need to call our mother. We're trapped out here. So she's like, let me get them inside so that I can ask them, what are you doing here? Where'd you come from? She knew that the kids didn't live on the block. She had never seen them before. Her husband, also an elderly gentleman, was sitting on the couch the whole time, and he was very uncomfortable with the children from the moment they came in. It was a little bit darker in the house. She flicked a light on. She saw their eyes. She tried not to react. So she gives them the hot chocolate. They both kind of look at it. They put it down. And the spokesman, there's only one that speaks, no matter how many there are. So the spokesman said, my brother needs to use your bathroom. And she went to say it's right down the hall. And before she could even say that, they started walking directly to the bathroom. The next thing you know, the power goes out, lights flickering on and off, something out of a horror movie. She turns and looks down the hallway. They're both staring at her. The one cat, she had 3 or 4 cats. One cat was just hissing and growling and mewling at these kids the whole time before finally it turned and ran and hid. So the kids are, and the kids are standing at the end of the hallway, and she's just staring. She doesn't know what to do. And the kids are like, the kid goes, our parents are here now. And they just walk from the edge of the hallway where the bathroom was. Never went into the bathroom, just stood there, turned around and stared at this woman. They leave. There's a lot of encounters like this too, where a sleek looking black 1950s styled vehicle with tinted windows will pull up no matter where you are in the world and pick these kids up every once in a while. The husband gets up so quick to close the door behind them. The woman's looking out the window, and she sees what I would describe as a woman in black, and I cover them a lot on my channel, opening the back door for the kids to get in. But the husband said he felt like the woman knew that he was watching her, because the way she was just staring back. Black sunglasses, even though it was, 2:00 in the morning in a snowstorm. And by the time he turned around to look at his wife, he turned back. The car was gone. There were no tracks in the road, nor were there any footprints from the kids. Now, a skeptic would say maybe it was snowing so hard that they were covered up, because they were in the house for about 10 minutes. The husband immediately starts getting nosebleeds. Same thing. They bring him to the doctor. He's got to go see a specialist. It's this. No, it's not. It's that. It's this. It's that. Depending on which account you read, and this is why I wanted to verify it, he either died of a brain tumor or was diagnosed with cancer and survived. The 3 cats were never seen again. Even though they weren't even out with the kids that night, like they were they were somewhere in the house, and the woman hadn't seen the other cats. They went missing the very next day and were never seen again. And the cat that was hissing and growling at the black-eyed kids, they found the cat deceased in a puddle of its own blood. And the vet said it had hemorrhaged from the inside out. And they couldn't understand why. It was like an outside force and an inside force hitting, like coming together inside of the cat. And it just kind of exploded it, unfortunately.
All right.
Those are the 2 I've heard of people letting them in.
Are you ready for another? Let's break this down into a possibility, another concept. All right. So we talked a few weeks ago on the show about angels and about what the concept of a real angel would look like. And many people, of course, are going to think of the long flowing hair, the beautiful white gowns, the gorgeous, flailed out wings, when in reality, most angels are going to appear rather frightening, a little bit more broken and abused, because they've been on the front line battling for us for so long. So what if the sense of dread that we feel when we encounter these beings is not associated to the beings? Maybe they are to look terrifying for a reason that's more protective in nature. What if these beings are being sent to people that are being targeted? Right? Now, this sounds like a Stephen King book to me, but the concept that the 3 cats that were there suddenly vanish, the one cat who doesn't like the 2 beings, implodes from within after these children leave. What if their job was to come erase or get rid of the cancer, the evil that had permeated into this home? and these beings are trying to get in, trying to help without us knowing it. And of course, because of their look, they're going to seem frightening to us. But maybe the concept is we send in the most horrific. For people that don't know this concept, that's why we put gargoyles on buildings. That's why we
Yes.
put terrifying things, is to frighten and be an affront to the fallen angels, because they're still of the mind that they are perfection, and they don't want to cast their eyes upon something so unholy and so disgusting looking, right? So what if these are the beings of light that are actually there to protect us?
I just don't. I mean, it is possible. I don't think anything's really impossible. For me, that would be such a huge stretch. But I do know, being a medium, that, and I tell this to my clients all the time, you have to invite your guides, your team, your ancestors, your deceased loved ones, your angels. You have to invite them in to help you. They may want to be sitting on the sidelines, like, oh, make that decision. If you do not ask for their help, they cannot help you. So the asking in, the inviting in fits with that. And I think any well thought out or even spontaneous at this point theory is better than sitting around pretending like these things don't exist. I don't ever understand people, and it's not a judgment. I just don't understand. Sometimes I wish I can go through life not knowing the things that I know. But then there are other times where I'm like, I gotta know. Like I need to know all of the things, you know? I don't believe they're angelic personally. I do
Mhm.
know angels are terrifying though. They are they're very terrifying, but I just believe this is something, if I had to choose, interdimensional and very lower vibrational. The popping noises, I have an encounter with the pops. People keep saying they're hearing it popping before and after a visit. Have
Very
you heard
weird.
that one yet?
Yeah, a little bit. We've talked about it with EVP and with some other activity where there's like this crackling or an electric discharge or
Oh yeah,
pop.
you and I had discussed that.
Yeah, right. So that is something, but let's get into that a little bit more. Talk about some more of the experiences right after this.
In Winter's Grasp, a chilling tale unfolds. Wanted Magazine's issue 40. Secrets to be told. Al Capone's ghost, in shadows it creeps. A spectral mobster, where darkness seeps. 14 signs of a poltergeist's might. Haunting whispers in the silent night. Pascagoula UFO, 50 years gone by. A cosmic encounter, reaching the sky. The ghost train of Tate Bridge echoes in the mist. A phantom journey, where souls exist. Wanted Magazine issue 40 is out now, available from selected outlets and bit.ly/Haunted Magazine. Don't be normal, be paranormal.
Yeah, all right. Gemma Jade's here with us. Midnight Visitors, True Stories of Black-Eyed Kids. Now, before you start sending me hate mail about David, obviously you're a member of the demonic realm because you're trying to perpetrate stories of shenanigans. I'm just throwing out concepts. I'm throwing out ideas, man. We got to talk. We got to get the juices going. What
Yeah.
if some people are offended by the fact that I would even equate these creatures with something angelic?
We
But I
just
think
don't
that's part of the
know.
enigma, right? We don't know, and I don't think we should throw any decision out without considering many different aspects of these beings and what they could be as well. Obviously, we've talked in the past about alien human hybrids. We've talked about the soulless. That was another aspect of it, children that were born without souls.
Mhm.
Um, uh, and there's, I don't want to get into the depth of that because it's some dark stuff that, can trigger a lot of people, but there are
Yeah.
children that are born, um, uh, stillborn and things, and that these are the souls that once inhabited them that are now walking the earth. So there's a lot of bizarre, creepy, elements to this. And I'm going to check while you're telling the next story. If you guys have a theory on what it is, ghosts, interdimensional cryptids, aliens, human hybrids, whatever, tell me what your thoughts are. I'll pop them up on the screen as Gemma Jade tells us another strange tale of black-eyed kid encounters. All right, Gemma, what have you got for us next?
Okay, so this one I enjoy telling because I've been saying for a really long time that if they're not interdimensional, how are a bunch of kids surviving? I guess if they're supernatural, there are ways, but it just, I don't know this. So I've been seeing this. I can't say a lot, but I would say I have about 8 encounters of this same scenario. So, this guy he wasn't a truck driver, but I've been getting a lot from truck drivers, like cross country in the United States and the UK. So this guy is going on a road trip from one part of the United States to another, and it's going to take him several days. He's driving, he's going slow, he's stopping to camp, he's got the RV, and he pulls into like middle of nowhere, Midwest, barely on the map town, and stops into this little dive bar, figuring he could park in the parking lot, sleep it off. He wants to have a good time. He's like running from something, I guess, is what he said. And he meets this very attractive woman. Now, she approaches him immediately, and this is a very little dive bar. There's not that many women in there. The ones that are in there aren't very attractive. This woman is stunning, he said, but as soon as she approached him, he smelled like the Women in Black smell. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but like the formaldehyde kind of death smell. So he was turned off, but she was beautiful and he was drinking. So she was buying him drinks. And the next
God,
thing,
we are a pathetic breed, man, aren't we?
It doesn't smell so bad.
Man, she's hot.
Yeah, I mean, give me another beer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So she's kind of plying him with alcohol. And at the end of the night, she invites him home. So as they're driving to his home or her home, which is in the middle of nowhere, it took like an hour from the little tavern they were in to her house, and she lives in the woods. He said he was basically almost sobered up by the time he got there. That's how long it took. And she didn't speak to him the entire time. He tried to make conversation. He felt like he was like on the other end of a serial killer, a female serial killer. He said he started to really panic, but he didn't know where he was. He's hundreds of or thousands of miles away from home. So he goes with her, and they get out in the middle of nowhere in this tiny little kind of ramshackle cabin. He goes in, they end up doing what they do, and still sleeps with her, by the way, even after the serial killer vibes and the stench. But it is what it is, not judging. We've all woken up with that like lagoon creature next to us. You know what I'm saying? But no. So he wakes up the next day early and he's like, I'm going to see if I can get like a cab out of here. She promises to drive him back to the RV. He tries to wake her up. She tells him, I'll be out in a minute. Just go wait for me out front and don't make any noise. So he's thinking, oh my gosh, maybe she has a kid or something. He goes into the kitchen to get a cup of water, and like 8 little between the ages of 3 and 8 or 10 years old black-eyed kids come out of like these other rooms. There's like 3 or 4 other rooms, small rooms, and they're standing in the kitchen all just staring at him. It's like 7:00 in the morning. He's hungover, probably a little regretful, and he said he didn't know what to do, and he was just like, have a nice day. And he goes to leave. They start going like they're going to block the door until the woman comes out and snaps her fingers. They all flee. She gives him a dirty look and drives him back wordlessly and silently to the RV. Doesn't say anything to him, doesn't say goodbye, speeds off. This made me wonder. It sounds a little bit like a ridiculous encounter. And when I first heard this one, I was like, I'll put it on the probably not going to put it in the book pile. But then I started getting more from truck drivers who were going on one night stands with beautiful women who smelled kind of funky. The other smell is like mud and grass, overwhelming, and waking up to a house full of black-eyed kids. And it makes me wonder, do they have keepers? I've seen cars that are associated with the men and women in black, and men and women in black picking these kids up from places, or these kids getting into those kinds of cars with those kinds of people, okay, many times. So are they being handled? And if so, for what? You know, they're collecting energy, fear energy, right?
Ugh.
What are they doing? They're living off of it, but what then, you know? And what does this regular looking woman get out of it? Or was she a woman in black? Was she a black-eyed adult? Did she have contact? You know, it just made my mind kind of spin when I started hearing all these truckers and cross-country drivers saying that they were waking up to houses full of these children after going home with the same specific type of woman.
Music says, could they be cryptids? Well, in a sense, right? They're
They could be
kind of,
anything.
yeah, I don't know what, yeah, cryptids are these creatures that are just not categorized quite yet. So good God. So Sandra says, when did these sightings begin? Like we brought up in the very first segment, the main one with Brian Bethel became famous in the 90s. But so did the advent of kind of online blogging and all of this. However, since I know starting my show 18 years ago, um, we started first, we were introduced to the 90s and the early 2000 stories. Then we started rolling back, and I started getting stories from families and people all over the United States and around the world that had encounters going back into the 40s and 50s. I think
They
that's
go
about
back
as
to
early back. Yeah,
ancient civilizations built statues of small children with pure obsidian eyes in the middle of their towns or in the woods. And I haven't found any encounters with black-eyed children, but I'll speak briefly about Oktar. You know, it's an old Iroquois legend about the children who would live, you know, with the tribes, and they'd go off in the woods to play, and they'd come out a day or two later. Everyone's looking for them. Nobody could find them. They're thought dead. They come out a day or two later. They are pale-skinned, kind of fragile-looking, big black eyes. The townspeople or the rest of the tribe are afraid of them. But the parents, of course, are like, no, my kid's sick, you know, let me take care of them. The next thing you know, the whole family that lives in the house is frail looking, pale, with big black eyes like obsidian. Then the whole village is overtaken and they move to the next village. And this is a real old Iroquois legend that I found. But the strange thing was, in all of my research for years, I have only found about 3 paragraphs on that. And I've never found anything else. Even when I try to look up the legend, look up the word, I had to go to my mother, who is Native American, ask her if she had ever heard anything about it. She said yes, but she didn't really know the extent of the tale. I can't find even the original article anymore. It's the one article that I bookmarked. It says it doesn't exist anymore. And that makes me suspicious. I'm sorry. I am a
right.
suspicious person. Like, who took all this information off the internet? So ancient civilizations did have encounters with some sort of black-eyed child. It's just that it wasn't written about.
Right, just like the Slender Man. You know, here we thought it was just this meme created, this creature created for an internet contest. And then we find out later that actually there have been iterations of this being that have existed in multiple cultures. Ristel says, Gemma, have black-eyed kids gotten more human in the reports now compared to the past?
Not as far as I'm aware. They haven't even started really. I guess, okay, I have come across more reports of them dressing similar to if there's a child in the home. So, like, I have a 5-year-old son. If a BEK knocked, that 5-year-old BEK would be wearing the same clothes as my son and be carrying my son's favorite stuffed animal. Like, don't you want to help me? I'm just like your son. As far as more human, no, they are still awkward and creepy and mechanical, robotic. They telepathically communicate right in front of your face. They don't ring doorbells when they're clearly there. They knock. No, I don't see them becoming more human-like. And I just don't like, I feel like there are so many entities that we are aware of that have overcome the eye situation, right? How many of them can appear to us without having to have these black eyes? These black eyes are the key to it. What is it that, because they know, they have to know, or whoever's overseeing them or in control of them has to know this is sinister, has to know this is what is going to put even the people who are they're like, okay, I'm going to put aside my dread. These are just 2 kids. I'll let them in. No way once you see those eyes. No way. So it has to be something that cannot be overcome. Now, no evil or demonic or lower vibrational being is supposed to be able to perfectly be able to copy the visage of a human without some mark or scar somewhere.
Mhm.
But even the demonic, when posing as small children, don't have all black eyes unless they're revealing themselves to be demonic. I've never heard of a kid saying, there's, a little kid in my room and they've got all black eyes that I'm playing with. No, it's only when someone knows that it's a demon and it finally decides to reveal itself as such that the black eyes come out. And I have heard many stories of black-eyed adults. Are they growing up, or are these the overseers, or are these a different thing? It's so much.
Well, then that's a good place for us to leave this hanging. But Dave, she just got started. Last time you only had her on for a half an hour. This time we had her on for an hour. Who knows? Maybe next time 90 minutes as we continue
I'm
to
in.
talk black-eyed kids, black-eyed adults, and we should start to cross culture with the white-eyed children.
Oh, I'd love that. I
That
have lots of encounters.
Yeah, that's a creepy encounter. What do you know one off the top of your head you could riddle off so people have a little taste?
Okay, so the one that I said last time is the one off the top of my head. A guy had a
Okay.
black-eyed kid knock on his door. There were 2 of them, 2 black-eyed kids, and they would not go away. And this was Midwestern United States. After the whole thing played out like normal, BEK, let us in, you've got to let us in. The kid's getting angry. It wouldn't let him, the BEK would not let him close his door. It kept putting its foot, right? Not necessarily stepping in, but stopping it. So he turns and he's like, I'm getting my gun. He gets his gun. He comes back. He's got it aimed at the door. He hears something in his head that's like, lower your weapon. He lowers the thing. He's like hypnotized, mechanical. There is a white-eyed teenager standing at the door. No BEK anywhere. And the white-eyed teenager says, where did they go? And he says, I don't know, but I was about to shoot at them. I don't know. And the white-eyed teenager just gets like a pensive look and looks him straight in the eyes and says, you won't ever be seeing them again, and walks off. By the time he gets to the door to look out the window in the door, everyone's gone. There's nobody on the street.
Midnight Visitors, True Stories of Black-Eyed Kids. That's the new book out and available by Gemma Jade right now. There's a link on tonight's program guide, and I've been hearing great things about the first book we spoke about a month and a half ago. I'm glad that you're able to fit us in and come back and share a little longer time with us this time. So thank you for being here, Gemma.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave. You're a rock star.
I appreciate you. And thank you all for tuning in and spending a little time here with us. For those of you watching live, thanks for coming in a little late and staying late with us. What are these beings? What is going on in the world around us? Is there a magic that's breathed into life when enough people begin to speak about something? Or do they exist all the time? And now that we're beginning to recognize them, people are feeling more secure to come forward and speak about these type of beings. It's almost impossible to say at this point to what type of experiences we're really having. But this I can be sure of. There is something strange, something unusual in the world around us. And if you're not too careful, you might just have an experience yourself. But now that you've listened to programs like this, maybe the darkness will be just a little bit more light with the information that we share here. Keep those doors closed. Keep the chain across the doors if you're brave enough to open it up and look into the eyes of the child knocking on the other side of your door, asking to use your phone. And if you're anything like me, you'll just keep that door shut and go back in and turn on the Paranormal 60 podcast and listen to that, or sit in and rest down with a nice book to keep you company for the night. Like, Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness by Dave Schrader, available now. You can get signed copies and standard copies at my website, paranormal60.com. Thank you for making me part of your week. We'll be back Wednesday with the Paranormal 60 news crew and a whole bunch of strange things and concepts to discuss. But I want to hear from you. Email me your thoughts and theories on the black-eyed children phenomena and what you think. And if you could put it into a paragraph or two of what you believe is really going on, love to hear from you. And if you have had an experience with a black-eyed kid, make sure to write and share it with me, and we'll share it here on the program on an upcoming episode in our mailbag of the macabre, when we go in and read your stories, your questions right here on the Paranormal 60. I'm Dave Schrader. Thank you for spending your evening here, and we'll see you again Wednesday night with the Paranormal 60 news. Let us in. Let us in. We want to buy a copy of Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness. Only on paranormal60.com, kids, so you can go away and access it from your smart devices. Or just ask your friend, hey, Alexa, order me a copy of Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness right now.